Today we are with Jeffrey Sachs, Director of the Earth Institute at Columbia University, also Director at the United Nations Millennium Project and Advisor to the Secretary General at the United Nations. Thank you, Jeffrey, for being with us.
Oh, pleasure to be with you.
I see that you do a wide variety of activities. You just finished your new book. And I'm curious to know, what are your main concerns? What are the things, the issues that don't let you sleep at night?
Thinking about the world, it's a pretty complicated place. And we have a world of huge inequalities between the richest and the poorest, big instability, and now a growing amount of environmental damage, but also crisis everywhere. Huge storms that kill tens of thousands, droughts in different parts of the world, global warming, the Amazon deforestation, so many crises around the world. So how do we make the world economy both serve the needs of everybody, including the poorest, but also do it in a way that doesn't destroy the environment and therefore come back and destroy us and the economy as well?
And how do we do that?
Well, it's not an easy challenge because we're facing a challenge that we've never had before. There are a lot of people on the planet, more than ever before, 6.7 billion people. You know, since the start of the industrial era, the world's population's gone up 10 times. And every year we're adding 75 or 80 million people to the planet. And all of them, of course, need food, need water, want a good life, expect the chance now or later to have an automobile, to have computers, electricity. And this is putting incredible stresses on the planet. Energy prices at all-time highs. Scarcity of water in many parts of the world, the human effects on the climate because of the way we're burning so much coal and gas and oil, clearing lands to try to make room for more food production, threatening the Amazon, but not just the Amazon, many other parts of the world where you have a natural environment and then it's just being cut clean to plant palm oil or to plant food crops or to make room for pastures. And the poorest people in the world, almost whatever shock happens, they're suffering. They're suffering more now from food prices, which are twice as high as they were a year ago, from oil prices, which have gone up 5 times in the last 5 years. So here we are trying to make the world work better for everybody, but there are so many challenges coming from what I call in my book, Commonwealth, the problem of a crowded planet. There are just so many of us, so much production, that figuring out how to make that work for all is our biggest challenge. And unfortunately, we haven't really gotten started globally, politically, doing this very well. Our leaders are thinking about other things, traditional politics, backroom lobbying, war, going to war, rather than solving these big challenges.
Can you now put a little bit the focus on the solutions? What would be the key drivers of those solutions?
Of course, when you have a big problem like this, the key is to make a good diagnosis, ask what the options are,
yes.
How much do they cost, what can be done by whom, how could you implement it.
Yes.
So it's a big global problem, and you come through the big issues. What could we do about climate change? What could we do about a still fast-rising population? What could we do about extreme poverty? On climate change,
yes.
Just as an example, about 80% of the human-made climate change comes from our energy system, which is based on coal, oil, and gas, natural gas. The other 20% comes from chopping down the forests. We need an approach that addresses a new kind of energy system based on sustainable energy and stopping the deforestation. Each of those is, of course, a big topic. But when you get down to the energy problems, we're talking about technology. What kinds of technologies could make it safe to provide energy for 6.7 billion people, soon it's going to be 7 or 8 billion people, in a way that doesn't cause so much climate change? And there are some obvious solutions, but there's a long way to get from here to there. Solar power is probably, by the middle of our century, the biggest single new option. Of course, some technologies exist, but they're expensive. They're not quite good enough right now. But there's a path that could get us to where we need to go. There are ways to use fossil fuels more safely by capturing the carbon dioxide and storing it before it goes up into the atmosphere. Yet, even though the engineers have pointed out how this could work, it's not been tried at a proper scale yet. So we need an approach which is a bit complicated.
You're talking about energy now. Do you think the solutions will come from the private sector or from government and public sector?
We can't be at one extreme end or the other extreme end of this spectrum. The public and the private sector are complementary, meaning that they must go together. They're not substitutes. It's not public or private, but public and private. The public is needed, public sector, what government does, is needed to help push the science along or to help test new technologies. The private sector is needed to get the job done in the end, because governments aren't going to be the ones producing hundreds or thousands of power plants. They're not going to be the ones selling long mileage automobiles. But the private companies by themselves can't develop some of these key technologies because there's basic scientific research needed, because there's public acceptance needed, because demonstration projects that are expensive need to be done, need to be tested. Regulation. Safety issues, the ability to locate certain kinds of power plants or projects in certain locations, how to handle the safe storage of carbon dioxide. So there are many issues that require a legal framework, a regulatory framework, an incentive framework. Why should the private sector do it if it's free to pollute? So we need public action as well.
You're an expert on the field. Are you optimistic that we will make our way through and be able to solve these problems in the next 20, 30 years?
The good news, of course, in our time is that we are living in democracies now. The implication of that, though, is that the political leaders are followers, not leaders. So this is an odd situation where the public has to lead the leaders. And that means that public awareness is crucial. And we're not there yet, because these are complicated topics. And for a long time, there's also been a lot of disinformation. So the public's been confused. The politicians, when the public's confused, they don't want to do anything. And so we need to be pushing from academia, where I come from, the universities, the scientists, the business leadership, because the business leaders have to say, look, this is a real issue, this climate change issue. We are going to be in a different kind of policy and regulatory environment. We need to understand it. I mean, how should we expect to get power in the future? What kind of power plants should we build? What should we invest in? How much is energy going to cost? So the business sector should tell the politicians, stop delaying. We need a framework to take this seriously.